You do miracles so great. Good evening. It's been a minute. It's been a minute, y'all. It's been a minute since your girl has been on, and I'm excited to be back on. I'm gonna do better, but life has been lifing. And just to introduce myself, I'm Coach Vonda. Welcome to our YouTube. We are the Circle of Healing. And we reach out to our community. And what we do is we just simply teach people how to deal with grief. I've been talking to you guys about life traumas and the things that you deal with as you are coming up in life. So the reason why I haven't been on is because I've just been busy really working that. I've been doing a workshop every Wednesday. And what we've been learning is that grief is a natural thing. It's a natural state. It's something that we're always going to be dealing with. And I just want to say it has been amazing just to see people coming out, and men and women alike, and they are really committed to their healing journey. They are committed to just simply healing, just simply healing. And since they're just simply healing, it's just been an amazing opportunity to be able to watch people grow, watch people learn, and people just for people to just know that they have a safe space. So having a safe space is one of the biggest things when you in your healing process. You have to have a space where it's non-judgmental and nobody is looking down on anybody. And when I tell you these workshops have really opened my eyes up to that people really do want to heal. People really are grieving. People really don't know how to deal with grief, especially if you think about in our community, the African American community. But then, I'm starting to also realize that it's just not also in the African American um, um, culture, but because I'm African American, I only can, really say, from my experience is that, we have never been taught how to grieve. We haven't been taught how to heal. We have only just been taught to just cope, deal with it, and move on. So when you think about that, when you think about somebody just telling you that, okay, you don't have time to heal, you don't have time to grieve, just get over it and move on, that carries a lot. That carries a lot of weight on a person. And then we wonder why, we, walk around and people are not healed from childhood traumas and carrying it around. And in one of these workshops, we talked about how long we have been dealing with grief. And, we all realized that we had been carrying it one day too many. Some of them were, years, 30 years, 12 years. I mean, it was just a long time, but then we all realized in this workshop that it don't matter if it's 24 hours. That's one too many days for us not to be able to try to, grieve and to go through. And I realized that, grieving is definitely not a pretty thing, and it's something that, people really don't wanna, um, talk about. But what I realized is that people don't wanna talk about it because because you become vulnerable and you become isolated. So when you begin to start dealing with the isolation and you start dealing with, you know, dealing with those emotions that you've never had to deal with before, um, that's overwhelming for people. That is overwhelming for people, and people just don't know what to do with that. So therefore, we mask it with other things. In the workshop, we talked about, you know, when you go through a season of not healing from whatever you're going through, that you begin to take on other things. We started talking about how, you can take on obsessions like, work obsession. It could be that you are um just trying to be perfectionist. We talked about the different things that you do to mask everything except for going through the grieving process. And a lot of times we don't know where to place those feelings. So therefore, instead of us dealing with those emotions, what we end up doing is that we end up, you know, doing busy work. We begin to start doing busy work and doing things that just keep our mind, from thinking about it. And when we talked about grief, we talked about that sometimes, we talked about how sometimes you just don't know how to process it. So when you start working on it, when you start dealing with it, and what we realize is that one of the main things is that we want to do is that we just want to acknowledge it first. And even a little bit of time I've been talking to y'all, I've been telling you that, you in order for anything to heal, it has to hit the air. My life personally, I understood that, pretty much, you have to wear that open wound so that way it'll heal, and whatever, whatever your healing journey looks like. Whatever your healing journey looks like, that's the map and that's the road that you need to take. But what happens when you don't really know what or how to get through that? Then what? What do you do then? Then you begin to doing compulsive things. I think I told you guys, like, I had become at one time a perfectionist. Or, my triggers were cleaning. Instead of me basically dealing with something, I would either, be cleaning or making sure everything was, not moved, not out of place, you know what I'm saying? Even down to, working and all of that stuff. I understood once I began to go through the healing process and the healing journey. Then I began to start realizing that I really need to deal with it. And that's the main thing that, I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help my community to understand that the more that we embrace grief, and the more that we embrace healing, that we can get better. And when I tell you what's been mind blowing for me, so we've done we did our third workshop last week. And when I tell you I've been absolutely blown away from day one, the very first workshop that we did for grief and healing. When I tell you, when I saw the men that showed up, and when I tell you they showed up, not only did they show up, they were ready to embrace grief. They were ready to embrace um, me, number one, first of all, because they didn't know who I was. But they embraced the process. When I tell you they were locked in, I was blown away. I was blown away that the men were showing up and they were basically saying that, hey, I need to grieve and I don't know how to do it. You know what I'm saying? And when I tell you, it has been mind blowing to me. Like, and in a good way, not in a bad way. It has been in a good way for me to know that when our men begin to heal in mm, our communities are going to be okay. When our men begin to, you know what I'm saying, understand how to process their feelings and being able to, show the next generation of that. Oh man, y'all. I have been, like I said, I have been blown away. And it has been intimate. It has been, just a space of non-judgment, and I love it. I love to basically see that people are embracing grief in this season. It's so much grief going on. It's so much everything is going on. And, you know, I now understand that a lot of this people just don't know how to grieve. They just don't know how to grieve or either even sit in it. What I told them also is that in the workshop, when you first begin to talk about your healing journey, number one, I already told you, you have to acknowledge what you are grieving. And then once you do that, all at one time, you may not be able to really embrace this, but I told them to take 5 minutes to to process when they're dealing with grief and when the anxiety comes and when the panic attacks come and when you are um not at ease and you don't know what to do with it. I told them to sit in it for at least 5 minutes. Take the time to acknowledge that grief. And you have to think about that as if, like, if you stumped your toe, it hurts in that very moment. I don't know if you've ever stumped your toe, y'all, but that is what let me tell you, I'm gonna just sidetrack for a little bit. I had a brick to hit my toe when I was little. And and when I tell you, like a cartoon, like when your toe actually throbs, my toe actually did that. And when I tell you, when I thought about that, I thought about that's exactly how grief feels in the moment because, like, in that moment, it's gonna hurt and it's gonna sting and it's gonna feel like It's not gonna feel good. I'm not even gonna kid you, but if you can sit in it for 5 minutes and just acknowledge it, it began to get easier. The more you invite that grief, the more you invite grief, the more you are able to process it and to be able to deal with those emotions that come with it and the feelings that come with it. If you the more that we avoid the more that we avoid going through the process of healing, the more damage we're doing to ourselves. Because we talked about also how not healing affects the organs and the body and your nervous system and all of that. We talked about that, and we were amazed that only if we can just find a way to heal, find a way to grieve, then we wouldn't be dealing with so much in our bodies. And then you can be, so you have to. Let me tell you, when I remember, you know, grieving things in this process, I remember I don't even know how I came up with that, just sitting in it for 5 minutes. I guess because I had been avoiding it for so long, like I had just been pushing it down, like, grieving the relationship that I always wanted with my father. You know what I'm saying? Even though I told you that story, and if you don't, remember it, or if you don't, know what I'm talking about, it's on another live. But I remember me having to sit in and grieving about the relationship that I had, that I desired to have with my dad, but never had it. And, I remember, sitting in that for 5 minutes and, and then just other things, just, even when, my son was murdered, you know, you have to compartmentalize all of that grief, you know. And, at the beginning, I just, you know, it was rough. But then I started doing it in 5-minute increments. I'm like, if you can give yourself 5 minutes to, be angry, 5 minutes to, to whatever. If I could give myself 5 minutes in that space, then I could put it away and then I could, revisit it. And that began to what that began to do is that my 5 minutes turned into 15 minutes, then my 15 minutes turned into 30 minutes, to where what happened for me, and I wanted to share that with people, was that the more I embraced grief, the more I dealt with the grief, it didn't knock me down as bad. It didn't come rushing in on me like a tsunami. It did not knock me to my knees every time, because 'cause I'd be lying to y'all if I said that it didn't. Every day I stood strong, or every day I, put on strength. Imma say strength, not strong, put on strength. Some days I didn't have it. Some days I did not have the strength to go on. I didn't have the strength to get up. I didn't have the strength to even wash my face, let alone even knew what day of the week it was, you know? But the days I could get up, I made the best of those days. Making the best of the good days is the only thing you can do when you're going through the healing and grief process. Especially if you've lost, what I'm saying? And the thing about it is that we also talked about that, you know, how great a loss can be, just of a relationship, not just not just physical death, but also we're talking about, the loss of, relationships, and grieving, what I'm saying, even that perfect job, or grieving, what could have been, or, grieving over, things that were out of your control. You know, when you think about that, like, we carry that, and then we don't know what to do with it. Not only that, the more and more that I embraced it, it gave me an opportunity to be able to say, "Oh, there is a process." You know? They'll tell you, in, therapy, they'll tell you that, they'll tell you that, it's different stages. Even, being a grief coach, it tells you about being, the 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But the one thing they don't tell you is that you can have all that going on at one time. I can be in denial and angry at the same time. I can be depressed and angry and in denial at the same time. It's not no one, "Oh, I don't hit denial. Oh, I'm done. I'm going to anger. Oh, then I'm going to bargaining." No, I thought it, at I ain't even gonna lie though. The first time I did thought it was gonna be that way. I did think that it was going to, okay, I'm gonna go through the denial. You know, I went through the denial as far as, feeling powerless, and just really not believing that this was my life right now. And, you know, but I can tell you one thing in my process is that it took me a long time to get angry. It took me a very long time in my healing journey to get angry. And boy, when I tell you, when it did come, it came like a raging, I I mean, I would have thought that, you would have thought, right at the beginning, if your son was murdered, you would be angry. But anger was not one of the, I mean, it took a very long time for anger to come. At one point, I thought anger wasn't gonna come. I thought I was gonna move to everything else because I was, dealing with the depression and denial part of it so much, and trying to bargain with myself of, you know, not trying to really face my reality of, how my life just changed. But when it did come, I remember I just didn't even like, you know, it, it was just so consuming. And, once I dealt with that, I mean, like, I think I kind of like was like, okay, I gotta accept this thing because this is doing me no good, no good at all. So therefore, it's best if I would just go ahead and accept this loss and deal with the grief, deal with the guilt, deal with the shame, and that's what we talked about in there also in the workshop. We talked about how, it's amazing how like different emotions are grouped together. Like, we talked about how grief and shame come together, and anger, anger and depression can come together because you can be angry one moment and depressed the next. You know, we really talked about, that, and how it's amazing how we are designed to be able to deal with all those emotions and actually really to say keep it together. And I mean, I know it was days where when I knew I couldn't keep, it was a point in time in my healing journey and dealing with grief that I had no other choice but to go on medication. I'm not ashamed to say it because it probably saved my life. Because I had to be able to, you gotta understand, you gotta be able to process. that you gave birth to 3 children and now you only have 2 of them, that's mind-boggling. That's enough to make you lose your mind, and when I tell you, when I said, "Okay, if I'm gonna do this therapy, if I'm gonna do all of this, then this means that, in order for me at this time, I had to just take the medication." And what that did was it did allow me to be able to have a level enough head to be able to work the process, get myself together. And once I did that and I came out, oh my goodness, so much better. I came out, you know, and don't get me wrong, because grief is a natural thing. Grief can hit you at any time. But the thing about it is now I embrace that grief. Just the other day, I felt like I could feel that anxiousness. I could feel that um that 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 anxiety, and just can't really shake anything. I realized that I hadn't been grieving in a very long time, and my son came across my mind, and automatically a little grief hit me. Normally, that would knock you down or knock me down, but I was able to sit in it. I was able to sit in it. I was able to say, "Okay, I know what's going on. It's been a while since you shedded tears. It's been a while for you know, it's been a minute." So once I started understanding that it had been a minute, and that was really on me, I sat in it. That day I took and I sat in it, and once I sat in it, the next day I woke up. I felt refreshed. I felt lighter. I felt like, okay, you know, okay, it, you know, this thing really works. If you really work it, it works. You know what I'm saying? If you work it, it really works. You know what I'm saying? And then, being able to, share that with other people, it's like, wow, if you really work it, it works. And it's just like anything. If you think it, now I think about it, it's really just like anything. It just works if you work it. It works if you work it. And that's all I know. All I know is that if you work the process of your healing, it works. And it don't always mean that grief has to always knock you down. Grief don't always have to knock you down. Grief don't always have to bust you in your head. You can actually embrace the grief, so that way you can start your journey, start your process. It takes a while, but it's worth it. I went through 4.5 years of my healing journey after losing my son. And that's what encouraged me, and that's what pushed me to become a grief life coach. Is because I understood that there is a process. We don't talk about it, we don't share it, we don't deal with it, we tuck it away, we deal with it, we pull it out, what I'm saying, we do everything to mask it. But I just want to share with people that you don't have to mask it. You don't have to, you can just simply go through it. Just simply go through the process, simply walk through the process, and know that it can work for you, and then knowing that it's so many people, it's so many people that are grieving, there's so many people dealing with stuff, it's so many people that don't know how to heal from whatever. And you're not alone. And that there is a process, and if you work the process, it'll work. And I'm just excited to keep coming back. I'm gonna keep coming back and I'm gonna keep talking about, my healing journey, my, going through grief, going through, losing a son and, showing you about how, I got through, just simply, embracing the process and, working on me and getting myself together and, knowing that I wanted to share that journey with somebody else. I want to show somebody else that it is possible to come out on the other side. So, like I said, I'm gonna be coming back. I appreciate y'all. If you like, share, follow. I'm gonna keep coming back. I'm gonna keep, talking about this thing until we just ignite. Until we have a community of people that basically are walking around happy, healed, and whole. This is Vonda. I'm gonna talk to y'all real soon. Thank you so much for you can like, share, follow us on Instagram at Circle of Healing VA. And hey, let's continue this healing journey. I'll talk to y'all soon.